Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, Longmeadow takes an awful lot of work, and there is always something to do and something that I should have done. But I do spend a lot of my time just walking around, and usually with a camera in my hand, just looking at the colours, the shape, the feel. And so far, this summer, here in the Jewel Garden, I'm really happy with what I'm finding. I think it's looking great. But detail still has to be inspected at every level by looking and taking photographs or notes or whatever it is that helps you record it. Then you are equipped to fine-tune and improve the garden. On today's programme, we meet a blind gardener who has created her perfect tranquil space.
When I come in here, it's just a lot of peace and quiet and happiness that comes over me.
Adam, Carol and Francis head to Birmingham to preview the highlights of this year's Gardener's World Live. And as well as trying to fine-tune the colours here in the Jewel Garden, I shall be adding more plants to the orchard beds to give them a really good autumnal display. While the Jewel Garden takes an awful lot of attention to detail, the grass borders are the opposite. This probably takes less time and attention than any other part of the garden, and yet it gives me just as much pleasure in its own way. Now, unlike the Jewel Garden, where you just have colour intensity everywhere, is we just dot colour through it. And one of the best plants for that is Nautia macedonica. This is a kind of scabious. I love Nautia, and I'd like more of it. I've got various clumps and it does self-seed itself, but it tends to along the edges where there's light. And I'd like to spread it out amongst all of these four borders. And that could get quite pricey. However, there is another very effective way of doing that, and particularly at this time of year, is to take a good clump, dig it up, and then divide it as much as possible. I'm trying to take as much root as possible. I want to ease it out rather than hack it out. I'm not trying to divide it as I go. Right, I've created space for new planting there, and I do know what I want to put in, but that can wait because the important thing is to deal with this Nautia. I want to divide this up into as many pieces as I can, and then I will pot them up, grow them on and plant them out next spring. And this time of year is perfect. There's still warmth in the air, and there's still a chance for the roots to get established once you've divided it. Now, the first thing to do is to cut off all the top growth. That goes on the compost, and now you have something you can handle. Now, this one here has got roots that are entwined. So if I get my knife out and cut that, I can make two plants out of this. So if I just cut here, I've now got two good plants. And you can see these finer roots are the ones that I want to carefully preserve. And it's worth pointing out that although Nautia is very tough, as a rule, you do not want to let these dry out. And if you've got to delay in planting them up, cover them. Wrap them in hessian or a piece of newspaper or plastic or whatever you've got. But get on with it is the best plan. So we'll put that in there. This is a compost mix actually with added grit because Nautia likes really good drainage. Well, you get the idea. Take a plant that is doing really well in your garden and gives you a lot of pleasure. Lift it now and then divide it up as best you can. Now, obviously with a Nautia, these are fleshy roots, and if you're going to divide it, you're going to have to cut it. And then they will regrow next year, and come March, you'll see signs of growth, and there will be a good root growth ready to plant out in April or May. And that way, you can really increase the number of your favourite plants that you know are going to thrive in your garden. It's also very satisfying. Okay, now, we all missed out on going to Gardeners World Live last year. And for those of us who go along to be inspired and informed, that was one of many losses. But there were some for whom they were going to contribute for the first time and going to be a one-off extraordinary experience, and that was taken from them. However, we've been sent a film from one of our viewers who had just such an opportunity and decided that even though she couldn't contribute to Gardeners World Live, she could make something of that experience.
Hello, my name's Kath Liley and welcome to my newly built and planted back garden in Sheffield.
It was inspired by the 2020 Gardeners World Live Beautiful Borders competition, whose theme was flower power. I was lucky enough to be chosen to build my design at the Birmingham NEC. The design was around a front garden, showing how even a small space could pack a host of garden elements to encourage biodiversity. Linked together, these small gardens across the land could make a huge difference. But we all know what happened to 2020. When the opportunity to do the border in the 2021 show came around, I didn't feel able to commit. Myself and my husband work in the NHS, and with 3 kids being homeschooled and my dad being diagnosed with and subsequently dying of motor neuron disease, it just felt too much. But the kids hadn't used the back garden in lockdown. What if I could scale up and create my very own space to fill with flower power? So the ley landi came down, a path was built, a pond dug, a pergola erected. It's all taking shape.
Thank you for sharing my garden with me, and I really hope that your space gives you as much peace, joy and pleasure as mine has given me. Bye.
I love the way that Catherine took all that creativity, all that planning and thought, and made it happen in her own garden, because now it exists, now it lives outside her mind and imagination. Now, I've had quite good results from the cactus mixed seed dahlias that I sowed in spring, and I know that a lot of you sowed them along with me too, and I'd be very interested to know how you've got on. What's really interesting is the way that different colours have reacted. The yellows have done really well. This is one of them. I mean, this was grown from seed in spring, and look how large and floriferous it is. I have to say it's exceptional. It's by far the biggest, and I don't quite know why. There must be a lot of compost underneath here. And what I found is yellow has done by far the best. I don't know why that is. There's been a pink colour, which has not been bad. There's also been a really nice sort of peachy apricot. Now that's pretty rare to find, so I'll definitely keep that. Now that's about 6 plants that I will keep as tubers and nurture and grow on for years to come from one packet of seeds. Now, we went to Hinckley in Leicestershire to see a garden that is beautifully looked after and beautiful to look at, but a garden that its owner has never seen.
My garden is my space. So much of my life I'm battling barriers and stereotypes, people's attitudes, whereas my garden is a freeing space. It's where I come when perhaps the world has got a bit too much. The garden is where I can sort of just leave all that behind, and I think it's the one place where I can just be me. I'm Sarah Davison and I went blind when I was 2.5. About 5 years ago, I bought this house. The sheer size of the garden scared me when I realised what I'd have to do to it. In fact, paving the whole thing did cross my mind. This has taken 4 years of just steady work, but it's allowed me just to do it all very slowly. Willow is my guide dog, but the garden is her free space. I don't have her on the harness when she's in the garden. She'll normally trot behind me, but then she will lie on the deck. It's her off-duty space. The plants I like growing in my garden are different textures, different smells, and have different memories attached to them. The Cercis canadensis is a plant that I've always loved. My mum grew it in her garden, and I've always just loved the shape of the leaves. They sort of like hand-shaped, and it's one of the plants when I was freaking out about whether I could actually do this garden, and my sister got this for me, and my mum helped me put it in, so it's almost the plant that started the garden. Sunflowers I've always loved. It's attached to another memory when my family and I were travelling through France and we were going through the sunflower fields and I was trying to understand how tall they were. And in the end, my brother made my mum sort of stop the car and we got out and he showed me just how tall they were. So ever since then, I've grown them. I love the texture of the leaves. You can feel the veins in them and where the middle of the leaf is. And I love how all the leaves shrug up around the flower and protect it a bit. And it looks like it's almost nestling in a lot of blankets in my mind. This is one of my favourite beds for textures. My Archimena mollusk had very soft leaves, but in the shape of little cups. And when you come out after it's just been raining, each leaf seems to be holding a cup of water. This is a bed that I can spend hours in sometimes just feeling around. And it's also a lovely bed for sound with the wind going through the trees. It's sometimes quite nice and calming just to come and sit here. This is where my raised bed is, and it's where I am trying to grow lots of different veg. As you can see, the courgettes are monster size at the minute. But this raised bed, because it's new and the soil is quite new, I'm a bit hesitant to weed in this bed barehanded because I know that there are a few nettles. I normally put one glove on for nettles just because it's easier, and if I do need one hand free to feel where I am, I've always got it. I do try wherever I can not to have gloves on because it's like blindfolding you. So this is some chard that I planted a while back that needs to go out. I just feel where I've put my French beans, I'm going to go in a bit. And I've left my spade by the hole, so I've got some idea of where it is. Just give those a water, putting my hand under the water so I know that I'm actually watering the plant and also how gentle it is. It's also just a nicer sound as well. When I got the garden, there were low fences, I'd say about shin height. I decided to put fences in, not so much for privacy, but just have something that the sound would bounce off of so I could get a clearer understanding of the sort of the map of my garden. I'd say touch and sound are one of my main ways of exploring and looking at the world. Each of the tall shrubs I have make a different sound when the wind blows through, and the lilac has a different sound to the pineapple broom tree. My all-time favourite thing to do, and it's going to sound absolutely crazy, is to mow the lawn. And that's just because it's something people think I shouldn't be doing. It's my little spark of huge independence, and it's also something that my dad showed me how to do. Unfortunately, my dad passed away about 6-7 years ago. But for me, it was almost like it's going to sound a bit silly, but like a rite of passage, because he taught my mum, my brother and sister how to drive. I never got that for obvious reasons, but he taught me how to mow the lawn. He understood that I needed bare feet to mow the lawn because my feet feel where I'm going, what I'm doing. And if you put shoes on, it's almost like a blindfold in a way. And I remember he just stood by the side of me and we went round the garden. I think it was the second time I mowed. I didn't realise this, but he went and stood by the garden gate and I thought he was by the side of me. And when I finished, he just said, "Yeah, you've got it." And so every time I mow, I think of him. For me, gardening helps with regards to sort of emotional or mental health. I can start on my deck in a cross mood, bad mood, sad mood. And because I have to go around my plants and touching them individually to find out what they're doing, by the time I've got up to the top of the garden, my mood's a whole lot better. I've been able to process things, just seeing the plants sort of thrive and grow. And there's nothing like seeing a small seedling poke up to make you happier or give you a bit of hope. It always amazes me and puts my faith back in gardening again. My garden is extremely important to me. It's the one place where I can just be who I am. I've not got to put on any fronts. I've not got to be big and brave. It's just a place that I know. It's a place I love. And so when I come in here, it's just a lot of peace and quiet and happiness that comes over me.
I'm fascinated in the way that Sarah describes wearing a glove as like being blindfolded. But to go around the garden just feeling everything, feeling your way, the intimacy that involves is so powerful. Now, I'm trying to make these long borders in the orchard better. They're really good in spring, but by the end of July, that all rather peters out. So I'm adding some asters. Now, some asters have changed their name to Symphyotrichum. And I've got Violetta, which is a rich, dark violet. Lou Williams is a lovely magenta colour, and Harrington Pink, and there's a clue in the name, is a light pink. I've been placing them just to have a see. And I've, by and large, been thinking of groups of 3. Now, what goes well with asters are Persicaria. I really like Persicaria. This is Persicaria rosea. And look how lovely those flowers are. Persicaria go very well with asters because, like them, they need a certain amount of moisture. Now, this doesn't grow much taller than this, whereas the asters will. So what we're thinking about is that sort of relationship, maybe coming forward a little bit like that. And I've got a third component. This is a Japanese anemone called Conigan Charlotte, or Queen Charlotte. Japanese anemones are fantastic plants because they really reliably flower in almost any situation or any soil from July almost through to November. There is just one thing to bear in mind. They really dislike being moved. Right, there's a good gap there actually. But when I am happy with the placing of these plants, I will plant them, which is the easy bit, and then water them in really well. Now, Gardeners World Live was cancelled like so many things last year. It's been postponed already this year, but it is happening and it is on right now. And a few days ago, Adam, Carol and Francis managed to go along for a preview.
I'm glad to be back here in Birmingham at our very own Gardeners World Live.
It's marvellous, isn't it? All these plants, all this activity.
So much to see, isn't there? And it's just lovely being back out and about, you know?
Yeah, it is. And though this garden looks beautiful and pristine, There's loads of building work going on around us. But I'm looking forward to getting into the show gardens just to see if I can pick up 1 or 2 ideas that I can share with you at home.
Because this show's normally in June and now it's late August, there's a whole new palette of plants to investigate and enjoy. And I'm looking forward, whilst people are finishing off, to having a mooch around and choosing a few beautiful plant combinations that everybody could emulate at home.
And you?
Well, if you're into houseplants like I very much am, then there's a brand new exhibition here at the show, which is all based around the theme of recycling and reusing. So with that in mind, I'll be heading over there and showing you how you can create your own houseplant haven for free.
But on that note, I think we best crack on.
Yeah, absolutely.
With all that's happened, the event is on a smaller scale this year. But there's still plenty to see.
What I love about this show is these show gardens are full of ideas that we can create in our own space. This is called Woodland Fall, and you imagine it's created for a couple that have got busy lives, but they live on the edge of a town, so the trees here are to connect with the wider landscape. I've got a bar, so I can have some mates round and enjoy a drink or 2, but you can keep your wine cool in that reel. Look at the back there. It's actually a moss wall. So here it's to indicate the view of the wider countryside. But I love this detail of the water just dripping. It helps set a mood. Any garden starts with its hard materials, and here it's simple. You know, the vertical material and the horizontal material, they sit comfortably together. But also the direction is important because it leads your eye and it starts to take you down the garden. As you move through the space, you arrive maybe later on in the evening when things are getting just a little bit cooler. You've got a fire surrounded by water. What better, those flames dancing, that lovely sort of reflective surface. Look at the cushions and the chairs and then the planting around it. It just all tones wonderfully together. And I think if I go back a few years and I lived on the edge of the town, this would do me. This little garden caught my eye. It's been put together absolutely beautifully. First of all, you look at those materials, they tone lovely with the sort of the pots and then the drain pipes. Look at the way it tooths and the gravel's introduced, and then the planting starts to come back in. Imagine that as a courtyard. Get home from work at the end of the day, you could definitely spend a few minutes there. Look at the planting, interplanted with our herbs and our flowers. There's enough there to make a really lovely cup of tea. Beautiful. This garden to me shouts of fun. Guess what it's called? On your bike. No, that's what it's called. It's all about reclaim and recycle. And in a world that we live, when so much is here today and gone tomorrow, I think that's important, looking around us, what could we use and make something special in our own gardens. But look above me, this arbour, it feels safe, it feels comfortable, it could be a den for the kids. Grapes growing up, and it's going to become better over time. But it feels really good, safe and strong. As they come out onto the racetrack, kids coming round and round on their bikes, there's a sponginess to it. The surface is reclaimed tyre chippings. The boundaries, though they're all different, there's a cohesion because they're all bike parts. The screen behind me, though it's the back fence, that could work in a garden, just give you a window through into another space. But the colour black is important as well, because though that sits in the boundaries, it's picked up here in the detail in the edging. And you feel like you want to run around the top end of the velodrome. I think if you're a youngster, there's an awful lot of fun to be had from this space.
I have been to countless flower shows and seen hundreds of show gardens, and if there's one thing they all have in common, it's a designer working away in the background, striving for perfection to leave us in awe of how they managed to create something so beautiful in such a short space of time. What lies beneath is the largest show garden here at Gardeners World Live and the brainchild of Professor David Stevens. The whole concept is to lay bare exactly how the garden has been constructed, as well as to inspire us, like a magician revealing his trick. We were eager to learn more, so we joined David and his team on this enormous design challenge.
The garden's called What Lies Beneath, and that's precisely what it is. Most people just see the top surface of paving, of decking, of various surfaces, and they forget how much work actually goes into putting the whole thing together, and that's important. It's like wallpapering. If you don't do a decent job in preparation, the finish is never going to be any good at all. The top surface is what you see. Underneath, there are many layers, very often, of different materials that have been compacted, have been laid properly, and that's where both the money goes and the time and hard work goes. In a normal garden, you wouldn't put too many materials in, but here I've tried to show as many materials within reason as possible. So the public come in, they walk over a resin bonded surface, then they go over the paved area, which is like the patio, if you like. Planks, then brick paving, which is my favourite. It's a beautiful mellow surface. The joints give it that directional emphasis. Then they exit onto a gravel area at the end.
A lot of people don't appreciate how much cost lies beneath as well. I would say 60–70% of the cost for a garden is underground.
In here, we've got a sleeper bed going in. They can be challenging because some of the sleepers are wonky, so they're getting straightened up now as we speak. We've got a deck here. This is a composite deck. This can be quite tricky because you've got to take into consideration some expansions. We're just now setting up the water blade, and there's a glass front going on there, and the glass itself was absolute nightmare to get hold of. Out of the blue, at the start of this week, someone rang up and said, actually, I've got an offcut that might just fit you. Do you want it? And I said, definitely, and it's here today. And it fits, so that's great. There's a real scarcity of products at the moment. You know, it's been really tricky to make sure that you can get the sort of really common garden materials in on time. Cement has been a massive issue, and we've actually been rationed a few times on how much we're able to get.
While you're building it, there is a considerable amount of fear. It's something remarkable to get right. It's a challenge to do, and it's a genuine honour to be asked to do it. And it's not my garden, it's the team that's done it. The designer only puts the design together. And at the end of the day, if the public enjoy it, I think that's probably the greatest accolade of all, for all of us, not just me, but for the team as a whole.
David, how has it gone?
It has been the toughest, longest, hardest build, and I've done over 50 show gardens I've ever done.
Really?
But the team, and it is a team, have worked absolutely tirelessly.
I think it's looking amazing, but do you think that the public will be surprised when they see it with bits that look almost unfinished but just deconstructed?
Yes, but I think that's the story it tells, and that's really the point, because we need to see all of these constructional things and how they're put together. And I think to start with, the public may not really fully understand that, but we'll have people here that will explain, and the contractors will be here because they're the guys that put it together. So it's telling a story, and I think the public will get that story.
I actually quite like it as well. I quite like the little sections where it's not just pure brick. It's got
You see the
other elements.
foundations, you know, you see all the different layers and things like using railway sleepers as paving. Why not? People think about raised beds, but then you can turn it into a paved surface. It'll take years to wear out.
Yeah,
it's good
absolutely.
carpet.
But the planting as well is really cleverly done, isn't it? It's sort of in two
It
halves.
is. The one side is the finished garden, as it would be at ground level.
I love the asters and the Rebecca's, that kind of daisy flower, but the different, it's sort of playing
Of
with
course.
the size of them.
And it's this time of year, so you're looking at your late summer flowering plants, of which there are many, the Japanese anemones as well coming through. But I was taught that shrubs are a backbone of a garden. They're the structure. Then you work in your hardy perennials, then you've got your ground covers, and the whole thing works as an overall composition. And that gives a garden balance and, I think, greater interest right the way through the year. But this side, the stars are the hard landscape.
Right.
So you don't want it too fussy or too busy. So I've tried to keep basically to evergreens and plants that aren't in flower. And that's restful and tranquil and lets the construction of the garden come through that.
Yeah, it sort of recedes on this half, doesn't it? I love that you're showcasing the skill that's involved in planting a tree well, but what made you want to do that?
Well, this is basically a root anchoring system. Can you imagine a tree of this size? With the wind, you've got a huge amount of leverage, and a normal tree stake just wouldn't hold the tree. So basically what the system does, you have spikes that are driven well into the ground, the wires are put over it, and then you've got this tensioning system. You can pull all those wires together and really lock the tree down solid. So it's both for safety and visually, I think it works a lot better as well.
So much nicer than seeing big wooden poles for years on end until it really roots well.
Absolutely right. So this is the way to do it with a large tree these days.
Yeah. Well, I think that people will find so much inspiration from this garden.
When us gardeners come to a show like this, what we're looking for is inspiration. And what this show has in abundance is lots and lots of plants put together in the most exciting ways. Associations that will work really brilliantly well together back home in our own gardens. Aren't I so lucky sitting in this beautiful corner amongst all these exquisite plants? They all blend together beautifully well. There are all sorts of familiar plants here, but some new varieties of some of them. Here's a new Achillea, and it's called pink grapefruit. This is quite a cottage garden favourite. It's lilac beauty. And the thing about Achilleas is those colours change constantly as the flowers age. And then there's a Gara. This is a new variety called Snowbird. Now, most of us are used to seeing Gara as a tall, slender plant, but here it's just as elegant, but much, much shorter. And it wouldn't be a summer border if there weren't a penstemon included in it. This penstemon's called garnet, and it's extremely hardy. It will keep on growing even through a very hard winter. The finer the leaf on your penstemons, the hardier they're going to be. All these plants are easy, accommodating. They'll grow in most soils, providing it's not too damp. But the thing they all require is sunshine. And we've got it today. And you can just imagine, even if you've got a really small garden, how wonderfully you could combine these plants, or plants like them. You could emulate this idea in your own garden. Well, you could almost be in tropical Cornwall. In this small space, the use of these plants really makes you feel like you're almost in a jungle. You become completely immersed in them. And what makes this work is the use of the tetrapanax and the bananas, really immense leaves. And then, just as you're beginning to wander your way into the jungle, you come across these great smashes of exciting colour. You've got a crocosmia here, Star of the East. It's the crocosmia with the biggest flowers, brilliant orange. And then this Nymphophia, this big red hot poker. It's called ruperi, but this is a special one. It's the yellow form. Rupari usually has a splash of bright red at the top. And there are more traditional plants, things like these heleniums, which any of us could grow so easily. And they'll flower for ages and ages. And right beside me, nestling in this corner, is this lovely rudbeckia. It's called butterscotch biscuit. They fit in so perfectly here. The way to prolong that flowering right into the dark days of autumn is to deadhead them, cut these flowers down when they've finished, trace down the stem until you come to the next bud and cut above it with a sharp pair of secateurs. You can do exactly the same with rudbeckia too, but in their case, I really tend to leave the flowers in place because afterwards you'll get glorious seed heads which will remain all winter, and it's brilliant food for the birds too. And I think what this garden proves is that even in a compact space, providing you choose plants with big, bold foliage and add these splashes of vibrant colour, you too can create your own tropical corner.
The House of Plants exhibition is a brand new addition to Gardeners World Live and shows us how we can create a lush, stunning oasis in our very own homes. Calathea rose picta is the perfect plant for a living room. In its natural habitat, Calathea are plants of the jungle floor, so prefer indirect sunlight and regular misting. Epipremnum marble queen and Philodendron Brazil would be a good choice for the bathroom, thriving in warm and steamy conditions. Let's face it, houses are not always the easiest places to live if you're a plant. There's very drying central heating, there's cold drafts coming in, and sometimes plants are even expected to survive above a fireplace. What you need, occasionally, is a plant that can cope with anything that you throw at it, and one such plant is this. It's a peace lily. They're very forgiving. They wilt when they need water, but also surviving quite happily. This is what a peace lily should look like. I could make, I reckon, 4 plants out of this. There's lots of different central growth points. That's just a bread knife. Now simply chop. As brutal as it is, these will grow back really nicely. Look for a natural place where they divide and then chop it. There we go. Now that is a perfectly good segment. That's about 1/4 of the plant. And all I do now is put that in a peat-free houseplant compost, just like this. Make a hole in the middle. Plant that in, firm it in nicely. Now give that a really good water and then put it back where it was. And I have 3 more, which I can find other tricky spots around the house. Now, with the sheer amount of different houseplants there are to choose from, there is no excuse not to absolutely fill your house and have your own lovely indoor oasis.
Sometimes it's the simple plant combinations that are the most striking, and this border really caught my eye. It's almost like wandering along beside a hedgerow or a road verge and seeing these very happy plants all growing together in complete harmony. It's very informal, it's very, very relaxed. But when you look into it, although there are lots of native flowers in here, cornflowers, several native grasses too, there are also lots of ornamentals, things like cosmos and perovskia. And yet they complement one another beautifully well. And what all these plants have in common is that they all enjoy the same conditions. As long as they're in full sun and reasonably well-drained soil, they'll be as happy as Larry. Don't you get tempted when you go to a garden centre or a flower show to just look at these lovely things, grab them all, take them home, and then wonder where you're going to put them? The thing to do really is to first of all consider what are your conditions, what's your garden like, and then look for plants that both satisfy those kind of conditions but also look utterly beautiful together. And I've just chosen these few plants here with these tall spikes of this lovely Gaura rosy shimmers, and then these big blobs of this bright pink dahlia. Little tiny dainty erigeron here just taking on this corner, and then this Hylotelephium atropurpureum Carl Funkelstein. The whole thing is delicious together. Whether you're coming to the show or going to a garden centre, there are so many ways of putting plants together and creating something that's completely original and your own.
Beautiful borders here have become a big thing. This year there is over 20, and I think they're a fantastic way for new designers just to dip their toe in the water and find out exactly what it feels like to design a little show garden. And we've all had to choose a favourite ourselves, and this one just jumped out at me. Yes, beautiful, isn't it? It's romantic. It's nostalgic. It takes me back to gardening with grandparents. Look down the front there. Coleus, it's a painted nettle. It was the first thing I ever learnt to propagate with my nan. But there's a bigger story here. This garden is actually about therapy. So everything you can see around me has been propagated, has been created, planted by a member of our armed forces that are going through rehabilitation. So for me, sometimes it's not just about creating beauty, but also why we do it.
During the last year, I think everybody has needed a bit of escapism, and this beautiful border provides exactly that. You're immediately transported to another world, immersed in all these gorgeous plants. It's positively sumptuous. Look at this gorgeous agapanthus together with this orange echinacea. I mean, if you painted a picture, you couldn't paint anything more perfect. It's just beautiful. And lots of the plants on here have been borrowed, lots of them have been given. There's a gorgeous aeonium over here, a big succulent, and very beautiful it looks too. And just in front of it is a plant you very seldom see, Angelica gigas, with these great big crimson flowers and dark, dark stems. It's a member of the umbel family, Apiaceae, and it's absolutely adored by wasps. They pollinate it, but don't be put off because wasps do lots of good in the garden. It's a brilliant plant, I absolutely adore it. Everywhere you look here, there are gorgeous, gorgeous plants. There's a Persian silk tree here with these dainty little pink flowers making this lovely silhouette against the sky. And then the Indian bean tree, golden catalpa. Normally you see it as a big, big tree. Here it's been pollarded right to the ground, and that means it makes this gorgeous big foliage too. And it's teamed with a colocasia. This one's colocasia pink china. And if you left it out all winter, it would probably be all right, provided it had a bit of shelter and a lot of mulch. The dark leafed one in front, Black Magic, though, is a bit more temperamental, but it's so beautiful, I'd give it a go, definitely. And sitting here in the midst of this, I just want to grow it all. I just want a garden like this, and I'm sure that everybody who visits here and sees this beautiful border, this gorgeous garden, will feel exactly the same way.
I love this floral border because it shows you that you can have a beautiful wildlife garden. Often we think of them as being very messy, almost quite weedy, and this one has not a weed in sight. In fact, the designer took inspiration from meadows and wildflowers that would be considered weeds in our garden, but rather than using them, she's used other plants that give that same feel. So the salvia, instead of a dock flower, for example, has that height and that lovely purpley red colour. But there's loads of other colours as well. There's all pastels. We have echinaceas, gowras, achillea, and they're all nectar rich to provide for the bees that would be in the beehive here. There's also a birch tree, which is a native tree, so it will provide lots of nesting sites for birds as well. Now, no wildlife garden is complete without water, and this one has it here in this lovely old trough. And even the pathways are thoughtful in terms of the wildlife below the soil. So there's no concrete in here, and it's just completely permeable and then interplanted with thyme that takes you up to your beautiful fence, complete with a wreath. Now, all the materials here are reclaimed, so environmentally it's really sound, but the planting is what makes it so beautiful. It's really, really well done.
Carol, have you had the best time?
Isn't it grand to be back? It's wonderful.
It is. I love this garden. For me, it encapsulates exactly what this show's all about, ideas and inspiration. So everything you can see built, you can then see deconstructed and understand exactly how it's put together at
Here's
the back.
what you get, but that's how you do it.
I know.
And David Stevens is the best teacher, isn't he?
Yeah, he taught me, so
There you go.
he's a cracking fella. But I haven't seen everything. There's one garden along there that I'm so looking forward to seeing finished. Hard landscaping looks superb.
Yeah.
Bit of planting, and I'm just looking forward to seeing this thing come alive, because I think it's going to be a cracking little garden.
Yeah. What have you been up to, Francis?
Well, I'm just really looking forward to seeing the floral marquee when that's finished, because it's really coming together and everyone's working so hard, but it's got a little way to go. But when it's filled with flowers, it's going to be fantastic.
But isn't it brilliant that everybody's made the effort and done it, you know?
Yeah.
Fabulous.
It certainly is.
I mean, I've seen a little border down there, which I just love. She's a first-time exhibitor. All she's got is this slate sort of path, big terracotta pots, gorgeous, colourful flowers. And the whole idea is she's in rented accommodation like so many people. You can still garden, you know, do it. Put lovely plants in, peat-free compost, beautiful pots, take it with you when you've got to go.
Get a big moving van.
Exactly, exactly. But it's been cracking, hasn't it?
Yeah,
So,
it really has.
I'm afraid to say that is it from us, Gardeners World Live 2021. I hope you've enjoyed the little taster that we've provided. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The show continues this weekend, and there may well still be tickets available, although they are all timed, so therefore restricted. But if you go to our website and follow the links, you'll be able to see. And if you can buy tickets, do go along. And I will be there tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it very much indeed. The Jewel Garden is the heart and soul of Longmeadow, really. And over the years, we've focused on colour, almost to the exclusion of everything else. Because we've got the familiar English country plants like roses and clematis growing alongside enormous bananas, like this lovely Ensetti growing there. And although I've grown it for a number of years, it still staggers me every day that I see it. And the cannas, we have green leaf cannas, we have the purple leaf cannas like Wyoming, which grows in pots and has these incredible sort of orange flare and flame of flower on top of great flower stems. They're the annuals, tithonias, sunflowers, even dahlias are exotic, and everything just wending themselves in together. But a jumble that works is a glorious thing. Now, we all love our gardens, how big or how jumbly they might be. And certainly that love is there in this film, that we've been sent from a garden that is up in the sky.
Hello, I'm Ian and I'm in Manchester. I've been gardening about 5 or 6 years now since I moved here, and back then it was just decking and just a blank canvas basically, and I wanted to make it my oasis in the city, and I'm getting there. I think I really wanted a pond, so during last year's lockdown I experimented to see if it was possible to have one up here on the 4th floor. So I bought half an old whiskey barrel and a bit of patience and lots of research. I've now got a lovely water feature. I've got some pond lilies, marsh marigolds, and I've even got a few fish, which I love. And now even birds come and have a little bathe and a drink from it. An issue I had though is that the balcony is north facing, so it was quite a challenge trying to find plants that didn't mind the shade. I've got a rhododendron, Fatsia japonica and ferns. They're all thriving now, so I got there in the end and I've enjoyed the challenge. Yeah, recently I got an arch. It was only a tenner. The roses and the clematis, they've just gone mad. Got my own little wildlife area, scattered a few seeds in the spring, and it's thrived, and the insects and the bees, they love it. So yeah, it just goes to show, even living in the city, 40 foot up, yeah, you can still have your own little haven.
There's no doubt that the more inventive you have to be to create your garden, and the more challenging the circumstances, the more pleasure you get out of it in the end. I'm filling this up because it's time to sow winter salad crops, and winter salad crops with a slight difference. Because what I like to grow that will last me right through till next spring are the brassicas, and they're not lettuces, the brassicas that come from China and Korea and Japan that have a distinct mustardy taste, grow very well in low light levels and are extremely hardy, and add that tang, that mustardy tang, either to a salad or you can stir fry them. I'm starting with Chinese mustard. This is a variety called Red Frills, which I've grown many times before. It starts out a dark green and then will acquire edgings of burgundy or purple or red. Very decorative and actually intensifies the flavour. Now, sprinkle them thinly on a normal peat-free compost. And then I'm just going to cover them lightly, firm it down. I'm just gently making sure that there's good contact with the seed and the compost, and that will help germination. Right, next is a leaf that I've grown for many years. It's called Mibuna. This has almost spatulate, strappy leaves, quite big plant. And actually one plant in a pot would be perfectly good on a windowsill. And it's cut and come again. So as you pick the leaves, more will grow. Finally, I'm going to grow something I've never grown before. I have a green that's been recommended to me called Komatsuna. This is a Japanese green, which grows quite large, about 18 inches tall. And the really interesting thing about it, it grows very quickly. I am assured that this will go from seed to plate in 40 days. Now that's lightning. I will water these and not let them dry out, but they don't need heat to germinate. A windowsill, a porch, a cold frame will be absolutely fine, even outside. That's one little job done. Here's some more for you this weekend. Now is a good time to collect seed from your favourite tomato varieties, and particularly if they're heirloom, it'll save you a lot of money. Make sure the choice is fully ripe, and if it's damaged, so much the better. Cut the tomato in half, scooping out the seeds and discarding the flesh. Put the seeds into a sieve and wash them thoroughly under a tap to remove the gelatinous covering. Then spread them out onto a kitchen roll, label them, and put them somewhere to dry. And then when they're thoroughly dry, they can be stored in a paper bag or envelope, ready for sowing next spring. By this stage of summer, leaf crops like chard or spinach are bound to have a number of damaged or decayed leaves, and these are a magnet for slugs and snails. So go through, removing them all and take them to the compost heap, and as well as reducing slug and snail attack, it will greatly improve ventilation. For most of us, lavender has finished flowering, so this is the time to cut them back. By clipping them regularly, you keep your lavender bushes nice and dense, but don't cut into old wood. Sometimes they fail to regenerate from this. If you do live in a very cold area, perhaps it's best to leave this till next spring, as the spent flower heads will add another insulating layer against cold. I'm making a couple of fairly dramatic additions to the new mound beds. I'm planting a couple of evergreens, of which this is one, and there'll be another to mirror it on the other side. It's a plant called Filaria latifolia. Now this is a really good tree, and I don't know why we don't grow it more. It comes from Mediterranean regions. It'll adapt well to climate change. It's very good by the coast because it resists salt. It's hardy. It will grow in most soils, will grow in sun, will grow in shade. So what's not to like about it? And on top of that, you can either make a good evergreen tree out of it, because it will grow to about 30, 40 foot, or you can do as I'm going to do, is you can clip it. It responds really well to toporizing. And now is the best time to plant any kind of evergreen. I've dug a hole, not too deep, nice and wide. Pop it there, so it's just above the surrounding soil level. Much better to have it a bit too high than too low, because if it's in a saucer and it's really wet, there is a real risk of trees drowning, or the roots rotting slightly, and then they get more likely to be blown over. If it's slightly above ground, the roots will go down and they will find the moisture and anchor it more firmly. I will backfill and give it a really good drink. And I would stress that when you're planting an evergreen at this time of year, if it's dry, water them once a week and wait till they get going. When you see new growth, then you know that those roots are getting established. Give it a thick mulch, and this will be perfectly happy. This is one tough plant. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget, Gardener's World Live continues till Sunday night, and if you're going tomorrow, I'll see you there. And if you're not going, I'll see you back here at Longmeadow at 9 o'clock next Friday night. So until then, bye-bye.